So, United Nations Summit on Climate Change is about to start from 31st October and will go on to 12 November. So, the question is, what is the Glasgow Climate Conference and why is it important? So, the meeting in Glasgow from 31st October to 12 November could lead to major changes to our lives and economy and prosperity of the world. What actually this CoP26 is and why is it happening? This question is quite pertinent. So the world is warming. The planet Earth is warming because of industrialization and use of enormous fossil fuels emissions caused by humans. Extreme weather events linked to the climate change, including heat waves, floods, and forest fires, are intensifying. The past decade was the warmest on record, and governments agree urgent collective action is needed. So for this conference, 200 countries are being asked for their plans to cut down emissions by 2030. They will agree in 2015 as well to make changes to keep global warming well below 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels and to try aim for 1.5 degrees centigrade so that we avoid a climate disaster. This is what we know as this 2015 agreement, the Paris Climate Agreement, and it means countries have to keep making bigger emissions cuts until reaching net zero in 2050. So, what will be the decision making at COP26, or what will be decided at the Conference of Parties 26 at Glasgow? So the most of the countries will set out their plans to reduce emissions before the summit starts. So we should get a sense of whether we are on track beforehand. But during the 2 weeks, we can expect a flurry of new announcements as well. Many are expected to be very technical, including rules still needed to implement the Paris Agreement. And for example, what some other announcements could include making a faster switch to electric cars, speeding up the phasing out of the coal power, cutting down the fuel trees, and protecting more people from the impacts of climate change, such as funding coastal defense systems. Up to 25,000 people are expected in Glasgow, including world leaders, negotiators, and journalists, as well as the industrialists as well. Tens of thousands of companies and business will also be there to hold events, network, and hold protests. Extinction Rebellion, for example, are calling for an immediate end to use the fossil fuels. At the end of the conference, some form of declaration might be expected. Every country will be required to sign up, and it could include specific commitments as well. COP26, the 26th conference of the Paris parties, the 26th conference of the parties climate summit is being held in Glasgow from 31st October to 12 November, and around 25,000 delegates from 200 countries will be there at the Glasgow, and 10,000 police officers from across the United Kingdom, and 1 lakh people expected to protest. 1.5 degrees centigrade is the accurate limit for the temperature to rise to avoid climate catastrophe or climate disaster. Nearly 200 countries are being asked to submit new plans or new emissions targets to reduce their emissions. $100 billion is what wealthy countries are being asked to give to help poorer nations. Are there likely sticking points? In the BBC News, it was very much well explained that expect a lot of talks about the money in climate justice. Developing countries tend to pollute less per head of population, the per capita pollution, and are not responsible for most emissions in the past. They experience some of the post-climate events and some of the worst effects of climate change in their particular region and regime. They need money to help reduce their emissions and to cope with climate change, and it could mean more solar panels in countries that depend on energy from coal and fluid defense systems as well. There will also be a battle. There will also be a battle over compensation for developing countries affected by climate change. In 2009, wealthy countries pledges $100 billion a year to help the poor undeveloped nations by 2020. However, this goal has still not been met and could slip to 2023. Climate finance is one of the challenges in the Conference of Parties 26, and it could have been the challenges to even fulfill the targets, emission targets in the Paris Climate Agreement as well, amount provided and mobilized by the developed countries as well. China's commitments at the CoP26 will also be very pertinent. It's now the world's biggest polluter and has investments in coal stations all over the world. Many observers will be watching how quickly China and other major fossil fuels producers will be willing to reduce their reliance on them, and how will COP26 affect me, affect you, and affect a common man. Some commitments made in Glasgow could directly affect our daily lives. For example, it could change whether you drive a petrol car, heat your home with a gas boiler, or take as many flights. You will hear a lot of jargon. COP26, the COP stands for the Conference of Parties, established by the United Nations. COP1 took place in 1995, and this will be the 26th in the series. Paris Accord. The Paris Agreement united all the world's nations for the first time in a single agreement on tackling the climate change, the climate emissions, carbon emissions, global warming, and cutting down the greenhouse gas emissions. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change examines the latest research into the climate change, and 1.5 degrees centigrade is very pertinent level of the temperature average annual global temperature, keeping the rise in global average temperature below 1.5 degrees centigrade compared with the pre-industrial times will avoid the vast impact of the climate change, scientists say. How will we know COP26 is successful, or how we will make this even a very pertinent conference on the climate change a successful even as host nation? The United Kingdom will likely want all countries to back a strong statement that to recommit to new net zero emissions by 2050, as well as big reductions by 2030. It will also want a specific pledges on ending coal, petrol, cars, and protecting nature. Developing countries will want a significant financial package over the next 5 years to help them adapt to rising temperatures. Anything short of this is likely to be just inadequate because there simply isn't more time to keep the 1.5 degrees centigrade goal alive. However, some scientists believe world leaders have left it too late, and no matter what is agreed at CoP26, 1.5 degrees centigrade will not be achieved.